Spiritual awakening is about identity. It is about who we're not and who we are. And we experience it and we live from it. And that is the pathway of awakening, to go through this whole journey of unpacking who we're not and then deepening and realizing and experience who we actually are instead, and then integrating that into life and becoming a living expression of divinity, of who we truly are. So that's the short answer. The short answer to what is spiritual awakening is that it is an identity shift that happens. It is an identity, it is to see the truth of your identity, which is that you do not have an identity. So it is to go from believing you have this identity structure and believing that's who you are, to realizing none of that is true. Going through a process of unpacking that and unbinding the illusion and all the layers to that illusion, to have revealed to you what is lying underneath it, which we could call our true self, awareness, emptiness, God, whatever we want to call it. But it was just lying underneath, and we didn't notice it, that it was there, because of all of the noise of the separate self, all of the content of the mind, all of the heavy emotions and everything going on. We didn't notice this very quiet awareness, this very still silence that is divine, lying underneath all of that all along. So spiritual awakening is a process of going to examine what I'm not, that separate self and everything that makes that up, and actually letting those things go, and instead realizing and deepening into what I am, which lies underneath it. So that's the short answer, that it is about identity. It's about shifting from having an identity and all the little separate identities that form that character, surrendering all of that so that you can live from what lies underneath. So it's an identity shift to no identity, to an identityless state. And that would be liberation. But there's many different shifts that happen along the way for that to stick. So it's one thing to glimpse what we're not, or to glimpse what we are. And it's something very different to live from the reality of your true nature, from awareness, every moment. And so that's all forms part of the spiritual awakening journey. And it can be quite involved because there's a lot that needs to happen. So initially it starts off with us examining what we're not, examining the beliefs that make up the separate self, examining who really am I? I have just been told I'm this person that should behave in this way in the world and should have done this job and be nice to people, and we start to question that, and that's us beginning to unpack what we're not. And we go on a journey with that, sometimes called Neti. I'm not this, I'm not that. So what am I not? And then we start to have access to glimpses of what we are. And so that will feel like an experience of unconditional love or oneness. It might feel like an experience of emptiness, or like everything stopping, or a deep silence, or a very deep peace. And in that, we get to experience what we are. And then we go through this process of letting go of what we're not, it's experiencing more of what we are, and on it goes. And as it keeps going, we might have these big shifts along the way. There could be our first realization experientially of who we are, a Kensho. And so we may be really trying to find it on retreat. I'm really trying to find that part to myself. Maybe doing self-inquiry or meditation, and very deeply searching for that part that lays underneath. And with some spiritual practice and persistence, we may have a breakthrough and have our first realization and experience of who we are, and it all disappears. And then we get it. This is who I am. This is what I've been searching for. And we experience it, and it can be very delightful to remember that's who we are. And so some might call that a Kensho, our first really big taste of who we are after we've been looking for it. Can feel really wonderful to have that opening. But that's really just the beginning. Then, because awakening is really about an identity shift, it's about identity, it's about letting go of identity and deepening into that non-identity state. And so the identity structure wants to fall apart during a genuine awakening. It really does, and it will. And all the practices and things that we do support these two things happening, the deconstruction of the identity and the deepening into being, meditation, self-inquiry. And so that's why we do the spiritual practices, to support those two processes that are occurring organically through a genuine awakening. And so once we go past what could be called a Kensho and our first, I know what I am, I've experienced it, how wonderful. Then we usually get to a shift where I sometimes call it the first identity shift, but it's where the identity structure that we've been questioning, like, is this who I am? Doing neti on, we've been really looking at it, we've been searching for it, we've been trying to find it, we've been doing self-inquiry, we've been trying to really examine it, what it's made up of. A shift happens where a crack appears in the identity structure itself, and this is a grace. It's a gift that happens spontaneously, but often after a lot of seeking. It can happen after a hardship or traumatic event or something, or a big mystical experience. It differs from person to person. But this is the next shift, is where we have this big opening, and there's now a crack in the identity structure. And now we're never going to be the same. We can't ever fill that crack back up, although we may try. And the identity structure is really going to start to collapse completely now. And this is where things start to escalate with awakening and become more about embodiment practices, and start to integrate the body and life into awakening, and all kinds of things that I talk about. And that leads us towards the permanent awakenings or liberation that can happen, where they happen on the level of the mind and the heart and the gut. And so I hope that gives you just a summary of the depth of how awakening works. Yes, it's about identity. Certainly, that is a great word to help explain it. It's not about having mystical experiences, although we may. It is really about remembering who we are and experiencing that ongoing deeper. It's not enough to just glimpse it. That's a good start, but we need to go deeply through the layers of it, because the illusion of a separate self runs very deep. That sense of self, that sense of me, is not just on the level of mind and the trance of separation of the mind and believing what the mind says and believing that I'm the one that is having those thoughts, but it's also on the level of emotions. There is identification with emotions happening. There's repressed emotions locked down in the system from the past that weren't processed. There's contractions in the body. There's trauma imprints and karmic imprints stored in the body. All of that feeding into the illusion of separation. So even if we've seen what's true, we've experienced what's true, it's not enough for it to stick, because we need to do the work of clearing out this vessel, clearing out the body mind, so that it can stay here, and so that we can live from awareness. So all the way through the contractions of the body, plus all the way through our unconscious material, on every level it wants to go, through all the past lives. It wants to be shown where there is any remnant of belief in separation left over, and it wants to be addressed. It wants us to look under every single rock and see, have I missed anything? Is there anywhere where I'm falling back asleep? Or can I operate in the world in a way where I never, ever forget who I am? Not even in a difficult confrontation with someone, at work, in my romantic relationships, in my parenting. So awakening is getting to a place where we never, ever believe in the illusion again. And so we go from early glimpses of tastes of what it's going to be like, and then we go through a whole process, which is the spiritual awakening process, to get to a place where it is permanent and we never forget again.